I prepared my resignation letter. Instead, she handed me a marriage license and a map to a room I wasn't allowed to enter. Betty Lewis needed a husband to close her billion-dollar merger, and she picked me, a nobody from logistics. 2 years of fake marriage in exchange for my son's medical bills paid forever. The contract was ready. The ring was sized. I just had to answer. 1 bedroom or 2? I said 2. I didn't know the house was built to spy on me. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel, and it proves that powerful stories resonate everywhere. Betty Lewis offered me a deal at 5:30 a.m. on Thursday morning. She needed a husband for 2 years to convince her board she was stable enough to lead a major merger. In exchange, she would pay for my son Leo's medical treatment forever and give me $5 million when it ended. I signed the papers because Leo's medicine cost $8,000 a month, and I was 3 months away from being broke. Betty asked if I wanted 1 bedroom or 2. I said 2. She said a car would pick us up at noon. That was it. 4 hours later, I was moving into her mansion with my 9-year-old son. The Mercedes arrived exactly at noon. Leo pressed his face to the window and said the car was huge. I told him we were moving to my boss's house because it would be easier for my job and closer to his doctor. He asked why. I said it was complicated. He fell asleep in the car 20 minutes into the drive. The estate had 12-foot iron gates that opened automatically. The driveway went through gardens and old oak trees. The house was massive, 3 stories of glass and steel with wings on both sides. There were other buildings too. A greenhouse, a pool house, a guest cottage. Everything looked expensive and cold. A woman named Margaretchen met us at the front door. She was the house manager. She had gray hair and stood very straight, like a soldier. She said welcome and offered to give Leo a tour. He woke up and stared at the house with his mouth open. He said it looked like a castle. Margaret showed us through the entry hall with marble floors and a curved staircase. She said the house had 12 bedrooms, 15 bathrooms, a home theater, a gym, an indoor pool, and a library. Betty lived in the East Wing. Leo and I would live in the West Wing. She walked us through a living room the size of my entire apartment, past a dining room with a table for 20 people, and down a long hallway to the West Wing. The West Wing had its own living area with comfortable couches, a big TV, and windows overlooking the gardens. There were 2 bedrooms connected by a bathroom. Leo's room was already set up. New bed, new desk, shelves full of books, and expensive toys. Someone had hung posters of his favorite superheroes on the walls. I asked how they knew what he liked. Margaret said Miss Lewis was very thorough. My room was bigger than our entire old apartment. King-size bed, a desk, a sitting area, a walk-in closet with 3 new suits hanging inside. Margaret said a wardrobe consultant would visit tomorrow because I needed appropriate clothing for public appearances. She said dinner was at 7, and Betty expected both of us to join her. Then she showed me an intercom system on the wall with buttons for kitchen, security, housekeeping, and emergency. After Margaret left, I sat on the bed and thought about what I'd done. I'd signed a contract to marry my boss and pretend to be a happy family. This was real. This was actually happening. Leo appeared in the doorway and asked if he could explore. I said yes, but stay in the West Wing. He ran off. I heard him opening doors and yelling about every new thing he found. I walked to the window. The view showed rolling hills, gardens, and the pool in the distance. Someone was swimming laps. Probably Betty. Even at home, she was working and staying disciplined. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number said, "Reminder, dinner at 7. Dress appropriately." BL. It was 3 p.m. I had 4 hours to figure out what dress appropriately meant and how to tell Leo we had to eat dinner with my new fake wife. At 6:55 p.m., I put on the navy suit. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Betty probably had someone measure me while I was sleeping. Leo wore khakis and a button-down shirt that had appeared in his closet. He kept pulling at the collar and asking if he had to dress up every night. I said I didn't know. Margaret led us to the dining room. Betty was already there, sitting at the head of the long table. She wore dark pants and a cream blouse. Her hair was down. She looked slightly less scary with her hair down, but only slightly. She told us to sit. Our places were at the opposite end of the table, 15 feet away from her. A chef brought out soup with herbs in it. Betty asked Leo if he liked reading. He said yes. She asked what his favorite book was. He said Percy Jackson. She said the mythology series was an excellent choice, and there was a complete collection in the library. Margaret would show him after dinner. Leo's face lit up. We ate in silence. The food was incredible, but I couldn't taste it. I was too nervous. After dinner, Margaret took Leo to the library. Betty told me to follow her. We went to her office in the East Wing. It was cold and bright with glass and chrome everywhere. She sat behind her desk and pulled out a tablet. She said we needed to discuss the arrangement in detail. The merger announcement was Monday. We would make our public debut as a couple at the board meeting. I needed to be prepared to answer questions about our relationship. She slid a document across the desk and told me to memorize it. The document was 3 pages of our fake history. We'd been dating for 6 months. We got married 2 weeks ago in a small private ceremony. We kept it quiet until after the merger. We were very much in love. I asked about Leo's mother. Betty said my wife died 3 years ago from cancer, and I've been raising Leo alone since then. She said she was fully aware of my history. Of course she was. She'd run a complete background check. Betty said the first public appearance was Friday at Charity Gala. Me, her, and Leo. The press would be there. I needed to appear comfortable with physical contact. Holding hands, her arm through mine, maybe a kiss on the cheek. Nothing excessive, but it had to look natural. I asked about kissing and my stomach turned. She said just on the cheek. She wasn't asking me to perform. I said sorry. She studied me and said this was a business arrangement. She expected me to fulfill my obligations professionally. Could I do that? I said yes. She said Margaret would coordinate my schedule. I would keep working in logistics, but with adjusted hours for appearances. Leo's school enrollment was transferred to Westwood Academy. It was 10 minutes away and had an excellent special needs program. I said Leo didn't have special needs. She said he had a chronic medical condition that required accommodations. Westwood was equipped for that. They were expecting him Monday. I wanted to argue, but she was right. Leo's condition did need accommodations, and his current school barely had a nurse. Betty asked if there was anything else. I said the house was big, and Leo might get lost. She said Margaret prepared maps. Leo was restricted to the West Wing. The main living area is the library and the pool. The East Wing was her private space. The basement was off limits because it contained server rooms and security equipment. I said okay. She asked if I had other questions. I had 1,000,000, but they all died under her cold stare. I said no. She said I was dismissed, and she'd see me at breakfast tomorrow at 8 a.m. I went back to the West Wing. Leo was already in bed, reading Percy Jackson with a flashlight under the covers even though the lights were on. I got ready for bed and lay there staring at the ceiling. The bed was too soft. The room was too quiet. Everything felt wrong. Around midnight, I gave up on sleep and decided to explore. Leo was snoring in his room. I walked to the living area. There was a door tucked in a corner behind a bookshelf that I hadn't noticed before. I opened it. It led to a narrow hallway I hadn't seen on the tour. I followed it, and it opened into a space between the walls. A maintenance corridor, maybe. There were pipes on the ceiling and electrical boxes on the walls. And there were vents. Large vents with metal grates. I knelt down and looked through one of the grates. I could see into Betty's office. The same office I'd been in an hour ago. My heart started pounding. I followed the corridor. More vents. One looked into the main living room. Another into the dining room. A third into Betty's bedroom. This wasn't a maintenance corridor. This was a surveillance corridor. I found a vent that looked into my own bedroom. From this angle, you could see everything. The bed, the desk, the closet. Someone could stand here and watch me without me knowing. I backed away and pressed against the wall. My hands were shaking. The house wasn't just big and expensive. It was designed to spy on people. And the person being spied on was me. I went back to my room and checked every corner, every air vent, every shadow. I found 3 small cameras hidden in the ceiling fixtures. They were sophisticated. You wouldn't notice them unless you were looking. I sat on the bed and tried to think. Betty said the basement was off limits because it had security equipment. This was what she meant. The whole house was wired. Every room was being monitored. But why? Why would she need to watch me? I remembered what she'd said that morning. You fit the requirements. Not you're the right person, or I trust you. Requirements. I was part of a checklist, a box to be checked. And now I was living in a house designed to make sure I stayed in that box. I looked at the camera in the ceiling. Someone was watching me right now. Someone had watched me discover the corridor. They knew that I knew. I lay back down and stared at the camera. I didn't know what else to do. I'd signed the contract. I'd moved into the house. I'd agreed to 2 years of this. But I was starting to understand that I hadn't agreed to a business arrangement. I'd agreed to be watched and controlled and monitored every second of every day. And I had no idea why. Friday came fast. The wardrobe consultant arrived at 9 a.m. and spent 3 hours fitting me for clothes. Suits, casual wear, shoes, accessories. Everything was tailored and expensive. The consultant was a thin man named Andre who kept saying I had excellent proportions and strong shoulders. I stood there like a mannequin while he measured and pinned and adjusted. Leo started at Westwood Academy on Monday. The school was everything Betty promised. Small classes, a full-time nurse, teachers who actually understood his condition. He came home happy for the first time in months. He said the other kids were nice, and the library was huge. I went back to work on Tuesday. My coworkers stared at me. Word spread that I was involved with Betty Lewis somehow, though nobody knew the details yet. The merger announcement was scheduled for that afternoon. At 2 p.m., Betty called an all-hands meeting. The entire company gathered in the main auditorium. Betty stood on stage in a black suit and said Lewis Technologies was merging with Nakamura Industries, creating the largest tech manufacturer in the world. The deal was worth $40 billion. Then she said she had a personal announcement. She told everyone she was married. She'd kept it private, but now wanted to share her happiness with the company. She gestured to the side of the stage. I walked out. My legs felt like jelly. Betty took my hand. The auditorium exploded with applause and gasps and whispers. Camera flashes went off. I stood there trying to smile, while Betty told everyone how we'd been dating quietly for months and decided to make it official. She said I was a dedicated father and a brilliant analyst, and she was lucky to have me. It was a performance. Every word was scripted, but it sounded real. Betty was a good actress. After the announcement, reporters swarmed us. Betty answered their questions calmly. Yes, it was sudden. No, we weren't worried about workplace policies. Yes, we were very happy. She kept her hand in mine the whole time. Her skin was cold. That night, we had dinner with Leo again. He asked if we were really married. I said yes. He asked if that meant Betty was his new mom. Betty said she wasn't trying to replace his mother, but she hoped they could be friends. Leo nodded and went back to his food. After dinner, Betty told me the charity gala was tomorrow night. I needed to be ready by 6 p.m. Margaret would handle Leo. He wasn't coming to this event. It was adults only. The gala was at a hotel downtown. Betty wore a silver dress that probably cost more than my car. I wore one of the new suits Andre had fitted. We arrived in a limousine with tinted windows. Inside, the ballroom was full of rich people drinking expensive wine. Everyone wanted to meet Betty's new husband. I shook hands and smiled and repeated our fake story 100 times. Yes, we met at work. Yes, it was love at first sight. Yes, we're very happy. Betty stayed close to me the whole night. She touched my arm when she introduced me to people. She laughed at my awkward jokes. She played the role of a woman in love perfectly. Around 10 p.m., she said she needed to use the restroom. She told me to get us drinks, and she'd meet me by the bar in 10 minutes. I went to the bar. While I was waiting for drinks, a man approached me. He was mid-40s, tan, with perfect teeth and an expensive suit. He said his name was Julian Thorne. I recognized the name. Julian Thorne was CEO of Helix Corp., Lewis Technology's biggest competitor. He'd been fighting against a merger in the press for weeks, saying it would create a monopoly and destroy smaller companies. Julian smiled and said congratulations on the marriage. I thanked him. He said Betty was a remarkable woman, very strategic, very calculated. I said yes, she was. Then Julian leaned in close. He said he knew about the contract. He knew the marriage was fake. He knew everything. My blood went cold. I asked what he was talking about. He laughed and said I was a terrible liar. He said Betty was using me to manipulate the board, and when the merger was complete, she'd throw me away like garbage. I told him he was wrong. He said we'd see. Then he walked away. I stood there holding 2 glasses of wine, my hand shaking. How did he know? Who told him? Betty appeared at my side. She took one of the wine glasses and asked if I was okay. I looked pale. I said I was fine, just tired. She studied my face. Then she said we were leaving. She'd made enough appearances for the night. In the limo ride home, I asked if she knew Julian Thorne. She said of course. He was her main competitor. I asked if he was dangerous. She looked at me and said Julian was a shark. He'd do anything to stop the merger. That's why our marriage had to look real. That's why I couldn't mess this up. I nodded and stared out the window. When we got home, Betty went straight to the East Wing. I went to the West Wing and checked on Leo. He was asleep. Margaret said he'd been fine all evening. I went to my room and sat on the bed. Julian's words echoed in my head. I know about the contract. I know everything. If he knew, who else knew? And what would happen if the truth got out? I thought about the cameras in my room. I thought about the surveillance corridors. I thought about how Betty had said I fit the requirements. This wasn't just a business arrangement. This was something bigger. Something I didn't understand yet. I walked to my closet and looked up at the camera. Then I did something stupid. I gave it the middle finger. The next morning, Margaret knocked on my door at 7 a.m. She said Betty wanted to see me in her office immediately. I got dressed and went to the East Wing. Betty was sitting at her desk looking at a tablet. She didn't look up when I walked in. She said we had a problem. Julian Thorne had posted on social media saying our marriage was suspicious. He was implying it was a sham to manipulate the board. I asked how he knew. Betty said she didn't know, but she was going to find out. In the meantime, we needed to be more convincing. We needed to show more affection in public. We needed to appear completely in love. I asked what that meant. She said starting today, I was moving into the East Wing. We were sharing a bedroom. The board was sending someone to verify our living arrangements, and they couldn't find us sleeping in separate wings. My stomach dropped. I said we agreed on 2 bedrooms. She said circumstances changed. This was non-negotiable. I moved my things that afternoon. Betty's bedroom was twice the size of mine with a massive bed, a sitting area, and floor-to-ceiling windows. There was a door that led to her private office. Betty told me she slept on the left side. I could have the right. She went to bed at 10 p.m. and woke at 5 a.m. She didn't want to be disturbed during those hours. I said fine. That night, I lay in bed next to my fake wife, staring at the ceiling. She was 3 feet away from me, but it felt like miles. She fell asleep within minutes. I stayed awake for hours. Around 2 a.m., I got up to use the bathroom. On my way back, I noticed Betty's office door was slightly open. Light was coming from inside. I walked over and looked in. Betty's desk had a laptop open. The screen was showing security footage. Multiple cameras, multiple rooms. I could see Leo's bedroom, the living room, the kitchen, and I could see my old bedroom in the West Wing. The camera I'd flipped off. There was a folder on the desk labeled D. Murphy Background. I picked it up and opened it. Inside were documents. Old documents. Photos of my parents. Photos of me as a kid. Medical records. School transcripts. Employment history. And at the bottom was a letter. It was dated 15 years ago. It was from Betty's father, Richard Lewis, to someone named J.T. The letter said, "Found him. David Murphy, son of Catherine Murphy. He's exactly what we need. Begin observation protocols. When the time comes, Elizabeth will bring him in." I read it 3 times. Found him? Observation protocols? When the time comes. My hands started shaking. I kept reading. There were more documents. Reports tracking my movements over the years. Where I worked, where I lived, who I dated. Someone had been watching me for 15 years. And Betty's father had ordered it. He'd chosen me specifically. He'd told Betty to bring me in when the time was right. Our meeting in the parking lot was an accident. Betty finding her prototype near my car wasn't random. It was all planned. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. Betty was standing in the doorway wearing a robe, her hair messy from sleep. She looked at the folder in my hands. Her face went pale. "David," she said quietly, "put that down." "What is this?" My voice was shaking. Who was watching me? Why? "It's complicated." "Complicated? Your father had people following me for 15 years. You've been planning this since. Since when? Since before we even met?" Betty's face hardened. "My father is dead. He can't hurt you. But you can. You're continuing whatever he started. That's why the house is wired. That's why you really married me. Not for the board. For something else. David, please. Tell me the truth. Right now. Or I'm taking Leo and we're leaving." Betty stared at me for a long moment. Then she closed the office door and locked it. She sat down in her chair and put her head in her hands. "My father started Lewis Technologies with money from a silent partner," she said quietly. "That partner's investment came with conditions. One of those conditions was that I marry someone with a specific bloodline, someone connected to the company's founding." "What bloodline?" "Your mother's." The room spun. "My mother?" "Catherine Murphy. She worked for Lewis Technologies 30 years ago. She was part of the original research team. She invented the core technology that made this company what it is. But she was never credited. My father and his partner stole her work. I sat down. My legs couldn't hold me up anymore. "Your mother died when you were 8, Betty continued. "Car accident. But it wasn't an accident. My father's partner had her killed because she was going to expose them." "You're lying." "I wish I was." Betty pulled out more documents from her desk. Police reports, autopsy records, insurance claims. My father confessed everything to me before he died last year. He said the guilt had eaten him alive. He told me to find you, to make it right. By marrying me, by giving you what should have been yours. Half this company, your mother's share. But I can't just hand it over. The partner would never allow it. The only way to transfer ownership is through marriage. That's what the contract really is. When the 2 years are over, you'll own 50% of Lewis Technologies. I couldn't breathe. Who's the partner? I don't know. My father never told me his name. All I know is he's powerful and dangerous, and he's been pulling strings for 30 years. "Julian Thorne," I said suddenly. He knew about the contract. He said he knew everything. Betty's face went white. "Julian? He approached me at the gala. He said you were using me." Betty stood up fast. "We need to leave. Right now." "What?" "If Julian knows, then the partner knows. And if the partner knows..." She grabbed her laptop and started unplugging things. "Pack your things. Wake, Leo. We're leaving." "Betty, what's going on?" She looked at me with actual fear in her eyes. The first real emotion I'd seen from her. "The partner doesn't want you to inherit. He wants to liquidate the company and keep everything for himself. If he knows you're here, he'll kill you. He'll kill all of us. Listen, if you're still here, it means you're invested. You want to see what happens next. But here's the reality. Most people watch stories like this and scroll away without subscribing. They enjoy it, then vanish. If this story actually matters to you, if you genuinely care about how it ends, hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. Otherwise, you'll probably forget this channel exists and miss all the other incredible stories I share. We didn't leave. Before Betty could finish packing her laptop, the power went out. The whole house went dark. Emergency lights clicked on in the hallways, but they were dim and red. Betty grabbed my arm. "Stay close to me." "What's happening?" "Someone cut the power. They're inside." We ran to Leo's room. He was sitting up in bed, scared. I grabbed him and held him tight. Betty locked the door and pushed the dresser in front of it. Is there another way out? I asked. The surveillance corridor. It leads to the garage. We went to the hidden door behind the bookshelf. Betty led us through the narrow corridor with vents looking into different rooms. We could hear footsteps in the house. Heavy boots. Multiple people. We reached the garage. Betty's car was there. She hit the key fob, and the doors unlocked. We got in. Leo sat in the back, crying. I held his hand and told him it would be okay. Betty started the engine. The garage door began to open. But before it opened all the way, a black SUV pulled up and blocked the driveway. Men got out. 4 of them. They wore dark clothes and moved like soldiers. Betty threw the car in reverse and smashed through the back wall of the garage. Wood and glass exploded. The car bounced on the grass. She spun around and drove across the lawn toward the back gate. The SUV followed us. So did a second SUV I hadn't seen. They were fast. Betty drove the gardens between trees, heading for the service gate at the back of the property. She pulled out her phone and tossed it to me. Call 911. I dialed. The operator answered. I said we were being chased and gave the address. The operator said police were on the way. We reached the service gate. Betty smashed through it. The SUVs followed us onto the main road. Betty drove fast, taking turns at dangerous speeds. Leo was screaming in the back seat. I kept telling him to hold on. We'd be okay, just hold on. One of the SUVs pulled alongside us. The passenger window rolled down. I saw a gun. Get down! I yelled. The gunshot was loud. Our back window exploded. Leo screamed. I climbed into the back seat and covered him with my body. Betty swerved hard. The SUV hit us and we spun. For a second we were airborne. Then we crashed into something hard. Everything went quiet. I opened my eyes. The car was upside down in a ditch. Glass everywhere. Blood on my hands. I couldn't tell if it was mine. Leo. My voice was hoarse. Leo. I'm okay, Dad. He was crying but alive. Not hurt. The seatbelt had held him. Betty. She was hanging upside down in her seat, unconscious. Blood ran from a cut on her forehead. I heard car doors. The men were coming. I unbuckled Leo and pushed him out through the broken window. Run. Hide in the trees. Don't come out until the police get here. Dad, no. Go. He ran. I tried to pull Betty out, but she was stuck. The seatbelt was jammed. The men reached the car. Hands grabbed me and dragged me out. I fought, but there were too many of them. They pinned me to the ground. One of them leaned down. I could see his face in the moonlight. It was familiar, very familiar. It was my face, but older, harder. Hello, little brother, he said. I stared at him. What? I'm Julian Thorne. Well, my real name is Julian Murphy. Your mother was my mother too. Different fathers, but same mother. She got pregnant with you after she left my father, after she stole the research and tried to run. You're lying. Am I? He pulled out a photo. It showed a young woman holding a baby. My mother. But the baby wasn't me. It was older. This was before I was born. She had me when she was 20, Julian said. She left me with my father and disappeared. Went to work for Richard Lewis. Got pregnant with you. Tried to start over. But you can't outrun your past. Why are you doing this? Because everything should have been mine. The company. The technology. All of it. But Richard Lewis stole it. And then your mother tried to steal it back. So my father, our father, killed her. And now I'm finishing what he started. Your father is the silent partner. Was. He died 5 years ago. Now I'm the partner. And I'm not silent. Julian stood up. Betty was supposed to marry you and then die in an accident. You'd inherit the company and then sell it to me cheap because you're just a stupid logistics analyst who doesn't know what he has. But Betty figured it out. She tried to run. So now we do this the hard way. He pulled out a gun. Wait, I said. Leo, he's just a kid. Let him go. Leo isn't yours. My blood went cold. What? Your wife, Marissa, she was working for me. She got pregnant on purpose. Leo is insurance. As long as I have him, you'll do whatever I say. You're insane. I'm pragmatic. Julian pointed the gun at me. Sign the company over to me, or I kill Betty. Then I kill Leo. Then I kill you. Sirens wailed in the distance. Julian looked toward the sound. His jaw clenched. We're out of time. Grab them both. We'll finish this at the facility. The men dragged me to one of the SUVs. Another group pulled Betty from the wrecked car. She was awake now, fighting. They hit her, and she went quiet. They threw us in the back of the SUV. One of the men went to search the trees for Leo. I prayed he was fast. I prayed he'd hidden well. The police sirens got closer. Julian cursed and told the men to forget the kid. They piled into the vehicles, and we drove away fast. I looked out the back window. Red and blue lights flooded the scene. Officers were getting out of their cars. And I saw Leo. He was standing at the edge of the trees, watching us drive away. He was safe. But Betty and I weren't. They took us to a warehouse on the edge of the city. It was old and abandoned, with broken windows and graffiti on the walls. Julian's men dragged us inside and tied us to chairs. Betty was awake. Blood covered the side of her face, but she was conscious. She looked at me and mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." Julian walked in carrying a briefcase. He set it on a table and opened it. Inside were documents. "The transfer papers," he said. "You signed these, David, and Lewis Technologies becomes mine. All of it. Every patent, every asset, every dollar. In exchange, I let you and Betty live. And if I don't sign, then I kill her in front of you. Then I find Leo and kill him. Then I kill you. Simple. You said Leo isn't mine. He's not, but you don't know that. You love him like he's yours. That's enough." I looked at Betty. She shook her head. "Don't do it," she whispered. "He'll kill us anyway." Julian laughed. "She's right. I probably will. But this way is faster. Less painful. Why do you hate us so much?" I asked, "What did we ever do to you?" "You existed," Julian said coldly. "You got a normal childhood while I was raised by a monster who beat me every time I didn't meet his standards. You got a mother who loved you while mine abandoned me. You got a life. I got nothing. So this is revenge. This is justice." He pulled out the gun again. He pointed it at Betty. "Last chance. Sign or she dies." I looked at Betty. Her eyes were clear and calm. She wasn't afraid. Or, if she was, she wasn't showing it. I thought about Leo, about my mother, about everything that had been stolen from us. And I made a choice. "Okay," I said. "I'll sign." Smart. Julian untied my right hand and gave me a pen. I took the pen. I looked at the documents. Transfer of ownership. All rights and assets to Julian Thorne. I signed my name. Julian smiled. He took the papers and looked them over. Perfect. See? That wasn't so hard. Then he pointed the gun at me. "Julian, you said..." "I said I'd let you live." I lied. The gunshot was loud in the empty warehouse. But I wasn't hit. Julian stumbled backward. Blood spread across his chest. He looked down in confusion. Behind him, one of his men was holding a gun. The man pulled off his mask. It wasn't one of Julian's men. It was a police officer. More officers flooded into the warehouse. They came through every door, every window. Julian's men tried to fight, but they were outnumbered. Within seconds, they were all on the ground, hands behind their backs. An older officer came over and untied me and Betty. He said his name was Captain Morrison. They'd been tracking Julian's operation for months. When Leo called 911 and described what happened, they'd traced our location through Betty's car GPS. "The boy is safe," Morrison said. "He's at the station with a social worker." I almost cried with relief. Paramedics came and checked Betty's head wound. It wasn't serious. A concussion, probably, but she'd be fine. Julian was on a stretcher, handcuffed, bleeding from the chest wound. The officer's shot had hit him in the shoulder. He'd lived to stand trial. As they carried him past me, he looked up. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said. They took him away. 2 weeks later, Betty and I sat in a lawyer's office. The lawyer explained that the contract we'd signed was void because it had been created under duress and based on fraud. But Betty's father's will was clear. Half the company belonged to Catherine Murphy's heirs. That met me. I was now a billionaire. I asked if I could sell my half. The lawyer said yes. I sold it to Betty for $1. She stared at me. Why? Because I don't want it. This company destroyed my mother. It almost destroyed us. You built it into something good. You should have it. David, besides, you're still paying for Leo's medical treatment. That was the original deal. I'm holding you to it. She smiled. A real smile. The first one I'd ever seen from her. Deal. We shook hands. Outside the lawyer's office, Leo was waiting with Margaret. He ran up and hugged me. Can we go home now? Yeah, buddy, we can go home. Where's home? I looked at Betty. She looked back at me. I don't know yet, I said, but we'll figure it out. Betty drove us back to the estate. The damage from the break-in had been repaired. New security system installed. The surveillance equipment had all been removed. No more cameras. No more hidden corridors. Just a house. That night we had dinner together. The three of us at the big table. We sat close this time, not opposite ends. Leo asked if Betty was staying. She said yes, if that was okay with him. He said it was. He liked having her around. She was smart and she knew a lot about mythology. After Leo went to bed, Betty and I sat in the living room. We drank wine and talked. Really talked. Not about contracts or mergers or fake marriages. About real things. Our childhoods. Our fears. Our hopes. I'm sorry, she said eventually, for everything. For lying to you. For putting you in danger. For... Stop. I took her hand. You saved us. You could have run. You could have left me and Leo behind. But you didn't. I couldn't. Why? She looked at me. Because somewhere between signing that contract and almost dying in a ditch, this stopped being fake. I fell in love with you, David. Really in love. My heart pounded. Betty, You don't have to say anything. I know this started as a transaction. I don't expect. I kissed her. It wasn't on the cheek. It wasn't for show. It was real. When I pulled back, she was staring at me with wide eyes. I fell in love with you too, I said. Somewhere between your cold marriage proposal and your terrible table manners and the way you smile at Leo when you think no one's watching. She laughed. Actually laughed. My table manners are perfect. They're terrible. You hold your fork wrong. I do not. You do. She kissed me again. We spent the night together. Not in separate bedrooms. Not in a surveillance corridor. Just together. In the morning, Leo found us asleep on the couch. He asked if we were boyfriend and girlfriend now. Betty said yes. He said good because he liked her and it would be cool to have a mom again. Betty's eyes filled with tears. She hugged him tight. That afternoon, we burned the contract. All copies. Every document. We built a fire in the fireplace and watched them turn to ash. 2 bedrooms became 1. The fake marriage became real. And the family that started as a business arrangement became the most real thing in my life. We were finally free. Ultimately, this story teaches us that integrity is a currency more valuable than any contract, and that true family is built not on blood or legal documents, but on the courage to be vulnerable and the choice to protect one another against all odds. It reminds us that while we may start a journey for survival or financial gain, the most profound transformations happen when we allow ourselves to see the person behind the professional mask, proving that even the most calculated business arrangements can blossom into a life-defining love. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to David, Betty, and Leo's story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Kindly support what I do here by subscribing. And then drop in the comment section if you like part 2 of David, Betty, and Leo's story. What challenges will they face as a new blended family? How will they deal with Julian's continued schemes? Let me know if you want to hear more.